It is a Tuesday morning / afternoon here on Believe in White Sox. We're back after a little 5-day break. Want to remind you to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Pods, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave a rating, leave a 5-star review. You can leave a different star review if you wish, but we prefer the 5-star ones. Helps the algorithm. We're getting a little bit of a boost in listenership numbers, and make sure that when I send out the tweet, you go to the YouTube page and you also like and subscribe to the Greg Mraz YouTube page. We don't have our own dedicated Believe in White Sox YouTube page. Quite simply, we don't have enough growth at this point yet to justify our own YouTube page. But we are recording on Tuesday morning, and one of the reasons why we didn't do any post-game pods over the weekend, number one, I went to the game on Friday night, which we'll talk about in just a moment, and I had a lot of work to do Saturday and Sunday, so we're not able to do that then, and yesterday had some stuff going on as well, so figured this would be a good bridge during the end of one series with an off day beginning into this upcoming series against the Sacramento Athletics, which is still, as a Bay Area native, weird to say. And yes, they're not technically the Sacramento Athletics, but they're going to refuse to acknowledge where they play, even though they so badly wanted to go play in Sacramento at a AAA ballpark. So they're the Sacramento Athletics, or we'll still call them the Oakland Athletics, just to piss some people off that are watching or listening. But White Sox come back home and they snap the losing streak on Friday night. I went to the game. Pretty good crowd for weather that was not that great. Davis Martin was fantastic. He goes 6 innings of 1-run baseball, 6 hits, 1 walk, and 6 strikeouts. Sox bullpen combined for 3 innings of 1-hit baseball. Cam Boozer, Penn Murphy, and Brandon Eisert were all really good out of the pen following Davis Martin. But Friday night was all about Chase Meidroth, and the story of him getting brought up was really the story buzzing around the ballpark, the story buzzing around White Sox social media, and he had himself a very impressive big league debut. He walked 3 times and got a hit, scored 2 runs. This is a very random and cherry-picked stat, but Chase Meidroth is the first player since Larry Walker in 1989 for the Montreal Expos to walk 3 times and get a hit in his major league debut. And the one thing I can say from watching Chase Meidroth hit, just in the 4 plate appearances that he had, and again, we have to preface it with small sample size, but you have to look at somebody over the course of what they've done in their career at all levels and understand who a guy can be based upon his trends. Chase Meidroth last season with the Worcester Red Sox hit .293 but had an on-base percentage of .437. In 9 games with AAA Charlotte, he hit .267 with an on-base of .450. Chase Meidroth, in 3 games already, has 3 hits and has drawn 3 walks. This is the guy that the White Sox have been looking for organizationally for a long time. This is the cure to what ails the systemic problem of a team that doesn't work the count. You need a guy like this to be at the top of your lineup. It doesn't matter how many home runs he hits. It doesn't matter how many runs he drives in. What matters is that he gets on base and sets the table for the guys behind him. And you look at the way that Will Venable constructed the lineup the next couple of days. He put him 6th again on Saturday in a game that the White Sox won in walk-off fashion. We'll get to that in just a moment. And then decided to bat him 6th again on Sunday. And I quite frankly think that he needs to be hitting higher in the order. And I'll explain based upon what the White Sox did at the top of the order in the Saturday and Sunday games. Because to have somebody that can work the count as well as he is, you have to take full advantage of that. And look, even if he's not hitting, even if he is not the guy that is going to be a reliable 1 hit per game or, go 2 for 4 at the top of a lineup. And I mean, again, you can't expect multiple hits every game from somebody, especially a rookie. But you look at the type of player that he is, and all you say is this is your prototypical number two hitter. He's not a leadoff guy just because the fact that I don't think that he's the type of guy that you necessarily are going to want to have leading off every day because I just don't think he fits that mold. Maybe he does if he continues to get on base at the clip that he does, but you know, you look at the course of his career, he's an okay base stealer. He's not an elite base stealer, but then again, nobody really in the context of baseball anymore is an elite base stealer. It's seemingly an art that, although in the new rules of pickoffs that Major League Baseball has instituted, I think that you're at a point to where you're getting more and more guys that are willing to steal bases. But Chase Meidroth at this point is the shining light of this season. Again, 3-game sample size, but you saw in a 9-game sample size in AAA, and you saw what he did in AAA last year in the Red Sox organization, and it made all the sense in the world to get him to the big leagues as quickly as possible. And regardless of what the White Sox do this year, you have had a problem at second base for as long as I can remember. The White Sox realistically have not had an everyday second baseman since Gordon Beckham. And Gordon Beckham didn't have a great offensive career with the White Sox, but he was somebody you could put out there every day and be a reliable infield glove and be the guy that you could rely upon to play that position every day. The White Sox wanted that to be Nick Madrigal, and it turned out not to be the case. And trading him for Craig Kimbrell ends up being a lose-lose for both sides because Madrigal never developed into the type of player that people thought he was going to be. And maybe Meidroth is the execution of the idea that people thought Madrigal was going to be. But in any event, an impressive debut for him on Friday night, and the White Sox with just an impressive up and down performance throughout the lineup. Miguel Vargas had himself a nice game with a 2 RBI double. Jacob Amaya came up clutch with a 2 RBI double down the line. They got the White Sox going. Omar Narvaez with 3 RBI on the day. Very surprised to see him back in a White Sox uniform. And Michael A. Taylor had a solid day with 3 hits and 5 at-bats. Brooks Baldwin with 2 hits and 5 at-bats as well. We go to Saturday now, and Martin Perez was not great. In fact, to say not great is an understatement. He had command issues, exited after 4 2/3. Red Sox got 2 runs in the top of the 5th inning, and that's what ended up sending him out of the game. But give the White Sox bullpen a lot of credit for holding the line at 2 runs. Mike Vassell was once again really good in a long relief appearance, and I think he is going to end up being a really valuable piece of this bullpen as a guy that he's not going to pitch every day or every other day coming out of the pen, but every 4th game, if you can have him eat 2 to 3 innings, I think that that provides a lot of value for what you're going to be doing organizationally. Luis Robert finally got off the deck in terms of hitting home runs. He had a 2-run homer in the bottom of the 6th inning that tied the game, and very solid game for Lou Bob as he scored 2 runs and drew a walk as well. Chase Meidroth had another hit. But the White Sox only had 4 hits in this game, and clutch situations, I think, are something that has eluded this team. The White Sox entering this game had been 0-5 in 1-run games. We have made that abundantly clear how big of an issue that has been, but they improved to 1-5. The Red Sox brought in Aroldis Chapman to try and send it to extra innings, and this is where I think that Brooks Baldwin is an extremely valuable player because of the fact he's able to make contact and get the ball in play. Luis Robert Jr. leads off with a walk. And after Andrew Vaughn strikes out swinging, and we're going to get to Vaughn in just a little bit, and I feel like we have some sort of discussion on Andrew Vaughn pretty much every show. Luis Robert steals second. He pinch hits for Joshua Palacios, which I don't know why Palacios is on this team, but that's neither here nor there. And by him stealing the base, it allows Brooks Baldwin to single home the winning run. And this was an intestinal fortitude type of win. This was the type of win that if you're a White Sox fan, you feel really, really good about what your team did over the weekend, given that you won the series, the first series you've won the entire year, and you win a game in which your pitching was not great to start. You issue 4 walks to start, but your bullpen does its job. One of your main power hitters finally hits his first home run of the year, and you play good fundamental baseball in the ninth inning in order to get yourselves a win. Now, Sunday is a bit of a different story, but the fact that the White Sox were in the game on Sunday, I think, is very significant because Garrett Crochet had a no-hitter going. I believe his no-hitter was broken up in the 7th. I am going to, and actually it was in the 8th. And who broke it up but Chase Meidroth? And the White Sox were actually within a run in the 8th inning. And they scored a run in that 8th inning, which ends up getting charged to Crochet. But they're not able to tie the game. And Matt Thice ends up singling home Chase Meidroth. Brooks Baldwin had singled to get Meidroth to third. He advances to second on the throw in. And then Greg Jones ends up pinch running for Matt Thice, and he steals second. So you've got a situation where you've got second and third. Sox are down 1 with 1 out, and then with Whitlock in for Boston, Palacios up. Again, why is he on the roster? Strikes out swinging, and Miguel Vargas flies out to left. So you leave 2 runners in scoring position, and Boston ends up scoring a run in the top of the 9th inning against Bryce Wilson on a Trevor Story homer, and that's pretty much all she wrote. Sox do get the tying run to the plate as Vaughn singled with 2 out, but Michael A. Taylor strikes out swinging, and that's how the series comes to an end. So Shane Smith was really good in this game again. He does not have a major league win yet, but he has been stellar in all 3 of his starts. 6 innings, 5 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, and 3 strikeouts for him, 79 pitches. And so far, he turns out to be the absolute steal of the offseason for the White Sox. And look, the White Sox know how good Garrett Crochet can be when he is locked in. And so far, his value is proving leaps and bounds for Boston through 3 starts. He's 2-1 with a 1.38 ERA. He had 11 strikeouts of White Sox hitters on Sunday. And, the White Sox, they miss Garrett Crochet. But again, the Red Sox are also a team that's relying on Aroldis Chapman to be its closer at this point in his career. So who knows what can be said about that. But I think our storylines from the Boston series should be that you've found something in Chase Meidroth that is going to provide a spark should he ever get put in the top of the lineup. You're piecing it together with guys that are filling in for injured guys. Omar Narvaez is on this team because he's a veteran, and for some reason the White Sox do not want to bring up Edgar Cuero or Kyle Teal, but Omar Narvaez is serviceable. The White Sox know what he can be. They saw 4 productive years of him. Do you want to call it 4 productive years? But or am I giving him 1 more year? No, I mean, Omar Narvaez was who he was when he was with the White Sox. It was only when he left the White Sox that he had his best year with the Mariners in 2019. And, however long he's around, fine. But you've got hopes of three different guys as your potential catcher of the future, and the current, and granted, I know Corey Lee is injured right now, but the two guys that you have on your roster in terms of who's your catchers are two guys that are not a part of the future of the organization. One guy that returns to the organization after not being in it for the past 7 years. So, I mean, who's to say what's what? Austin Slater, by the way, went on the IL as well. So you've got Benintendi and Slater on the IL, which is why you've got Brooks Baldwin playing the outfield as much as he is. Greg Jones has yet to actually start a game. I don't think he's going to be a guy that ends up starting a game. I think he's going to be more of your pinch runner, defensive replacement. Josh Palacios is just, again, I'd rather see somebody younger. I'd rather see somebody that is going to have an impact for potentially years to come. But it doesn't look like we're going to necessarily see that. I'm curious. I haven't followed what's going on at this point in AAA with Oscar Colas. So give me a sec to actually get up to date on him. All right. Well, it's gone. He's in Double A Birmingham at this point, so don't think we're going to be seeing any of Oscar Colas at any point quite soon. But maybe if he ends up getting hot, there's a chance that he gets back in the mix. So who knows? It's an interesting time in White Sox land, but there's some other things that we got to discuss that I think are kind of pertinent to the upcoming series and potentially to the future of the organization. So the White Sox will be welcoming in the formerly known Oakland Athletics to the ballpark tonight, tomorrow, and Thursday. I might try and get out there tomorrow night or Thursday. I actually have first IM softball game tonight, so I will not be actually watching the White Sox tonight. But I do want to say that this is an A's team that can be had. They're not good pitching wise. Now, a lot of their numbers are, relatively speaking, inflated by the ballpark that they play in, which is a AAA ballpark in an area that gets very, very hot. I don't know if anybody has ever been to Sacramento, California. I have many times. I grew up about an hour and a half away from there. It is a launching pad. And when it gets warm and the wind's blowing out, it jumps, especially into the gaps, and also jumps over the right field wall and the right center field wall. So a lot of these A's numbers might be a little bit inflated, but the A's enter with a 4.91 team ERA, which is fourth worst in all of baseball. And at last check, once we go to our page, is the worst in the American League. So this is an A's team I feel like can be had. And again, I know that at 4-11, the White Sox don't necessarily feel like they are in a great position to be competitive, but little by little, you got to find ways to climb back and find your groove. And maybe, just maybe, the Red Sox series was the chance that you had. Now, the White Sox, I think, are going to have a litmus test moment following this A's series because you don't get to go back to the friendly confines of Rate Field until April 29th after Thursday. You've got a 4-game series in Boston. And by the way, they are playing on Monday at 10:10 in the morning, which is the annual Boston Marathon game. And I think that it's going to be very curious for the White Sox having 3 straight day games. They got a night game on Friday, then a 3:10 start Central Time on Saturday, then 12:35 Central on Sunday, and 10:10 a.m. on Monday the 21st. Then they'll go to Minnesota, 3 games there, 2 night games and a day game, and then they will fly out west to Sacramento for a night game followed by 2 day games at Sutter Health Park in Sacramento. So we'll see where the White Sox are at when they come back from this road trip. We'll see if any of the injured players come off of the injured list. Guys that I am encouraged by at the moment, based on the way they're playing, obviously Chase Meidroth is a big part of that in terms of the way that he is approaching things at the plate. Brooks Baldwin, we've talked about at length in terms of how impactful he has been. But this is still a team that, call a spade a spade. This is still offensively one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball. they're hitting 201 as a team, which is worse in the American League. Third worst in all baseball, behind only the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Cincinnati Reds. Their pitching has gotten them to the 4 wins that they've had. And it's the most eloquently we can talk about a 4-11 team out there. But individually speaking, I mean, this is a team that the guys that are getting the majority of your at bats are all hitting below 250. I mean, if you're looking statistically speaking, of any player that has more than 40 at bats, Brooks Baldwin has the highest average at 268. Andrew Benintendi is hitting 290, but he's on the injured list. He only has 31 at bats. But you look at the guys that are getting the lion's share of playing time. Miguel Vargas leads the team with 54 bats. He's hitting 148 with an on base of 258. So at least he's drawing a few walks. Andrew Vaughn, I just don't know. You got to keep putting him out there, but he's hitting 113. He's got 1 homer. He's walked 4 times. He's only struck out 14. I feel like that should be more. His on base is only 175, and his slugging is 208. So of his 6 total hits, only 3 of them are extra base hits. Luis Robert Jr., he's got to get himself going because he's going to have no trade value if he continues to play like he's playing. 163 average. He has struck out 16 times in 49 at bats. So, the core of this team, and the White Sox are giving Lenyn Sosa every opportunity to be the everyday second baseman, and he actually played first base one of the games of the Red Sox series, and he's hitting 213. At least he's showing some signs of life. He's got 10 hits on the year, which is second most amongst all players, and Brooks Baldwin's first with 11. I mean, it's kind of a sad sign when your second leading hitter in terms of total hits is hitting 213. But, then, the White Sox have a bunch of other guys that are just in these various platoon situations. And we'll see whether or not Chase Meidroth continues on the path that he is. We'll see if Omar Narvaez continues to play. And I think that I'll be very curious to see whether or not the decisions that Will Venable made in regards to Matt Thaiss and Corey Lee's playing time, if that was a result of him wanting to play righty-lefty matchups, or if he actually had a preferred catcher. So we'll see what the lineup construction of this series against the A's is going to be, but you've got 2 left-handed hitting catchers now as opposed to a right-handed hitting catcher and a left-handed hitting catcher. Wait, is Omar Narvaez a switch hitter? No, he's a left-handed hitting only. For whatever reason, I thought he was a switch hitter, but we'll see what the lineup construction ends up being like for the A's series. I don't care really one way or another. I just want to see the guys that you have staked a lot of your future on, or at least some of your present, start to play a little bit better. And I think Miguel Vargas is the guy that I'm looking most to in order to try and prove to the White Sox that he's worth keeping around and that his value that you got back in the Kopech and Fetty trade, or the Kopech trade, I should say, was well worth it. So now I want to talk about it was the Kopech trade, pardon me. Fetty went to no, wait, that was part of the same trade. I don't know. It all blends together. It's a sunk cost at this point. You want to see what Miguel Vargas is going to be for you moving forward. The last thing I want to talk about is the report that 670 The Score's Matt Spiegel came out with in regards to the current stake of ownership structure for the White Sox. So it was revealed that the Ashiba brothers got some more minority ownership stakes purchased recently. And Spiegel actually was able to, and it was put out on 670 The Score's Twitter, get an ownership breakdown of who owns what. So Justin and Matt Ashiba, and Matt Ashiba, who is the primary owner of the Phoenix Suns, they own together 35% of the White Sox. Jerry Reinsdorf owns 20%. There is a fund that is controlled by his sons, Michael and Jonathan Reinsdorf, that accounts for 30%. So effectively, Reinsdorf is still, the Reinsdorf collective is still at 50%. And then the other 15% is owned by 8 plus, and there wasn't anything specified in the tweet here, limited partners. So here's the problem: Jerry isn't going to sell his stake. And by directive, the fund that's controlled by his sons aren't going to control their stake. I'm curious to see where this White Sox ownership group goes and how it dictates the future of the White Sox ballpark, how much this organization spends, what's the direction, big picture. And we may not know this for a couple of years, but Jerry Reinsdorf is in his 90s and he looks very much healthy. And if he has no interest in selling the team, as Bob Nightingale put out, and for those that are familiar with Sir Bob's work, he is very well tapped into the inner workings of Jerry Reinsdorf and his inner circle. So I trust, as much as what Bob Nightingale does bugs me. I don't understand how a guy that has that many typos in his tweets still is employed as a professional writer. Granted, he is a very well sourced individual, but Bob, you got to check your grammar, dude. Like, the stuff that he puts out there on Twitter, it blows my mind that he leaves it up and has no realization of the mistake that he made in terms of the context or the typo, because a lot of times the typo can end up being significant. Like, he on Twitter accidentally killed Bryce Harper. So anyway, not the point. The point being is that the future of the White Sox organization, I think, is in flux because you've got two owners that want to end up being the majority owners of this team. And you have the current majority owner who does not want to give up his majority stake. And again, the way that the ownership structure is set up, it's not like Jerry Reinsdorf is the most powerful guy in the room, but he is. I just contradict myself, but Jerry Reinsdorf is the majority owner. But he's by no means worth the most money of any of the White Sox owners, whether they be limited partners or the now majority stakeholders, the now new majority minority stakeholders of the Ashiba brothers. A lot of people can point to what's going on with the turmoil in the Phoenix Suns organization and the fact that they keep cycling through head coaches. They have, in consecutive seasons, fired Monty Williams, Frank Vogel, and Mike Budenholzer. The latter two of which won NBA championships with other organizations. So there may be a volatility factor that comes with the Ashiba family, but there's enough of a track record. In fact, it's a large track record with the White Sox organization to where change is needed, and maybe the devil you don't know is better than the devil you do. And if you look at the way that the White Sox have operated, the fact that there is no urgency to drastically get better following, in fact, there's no drastic urgency at all, it seems like, from the organization to get better quickly. But again, this is of Jerry Reinsdorf's own doing. He hired the manager that effectively tore apart the culture that had been building, and then it all fell apart really in 2023, and some of the remaining pieces in 2024 were part of the worst season in the history of modern Major League Baseball. And now it's up to a bunch of young guys and a somewhat new coaching staff, because there are still people that are in place from before, to pick up the pieces with a president of baseball operations that is, quite frankly, in over his head. we've discussed at length the fact that Chris Getz is not the right person for this job because he didn't prove at his previous position as the director of minor league operations that he was necessarily qualified to do that. The White Sox have year in and year out had a substandard track record in terms of developing players at the minor league level. But again, I think that it's an interesting dive into where the organization is, but I don't necessarily think it means that anything changes anytime soon. This is something we're going to have to follow for years to come. And with that note, I've rambled on for a little bit too long, and so we are going to say goodbye here on Believe in White Sox. Sox and the A's open up a series tonight down at Wright Field. Hopefully, the White Sox can take 2 of 3 and go on to their 10-game road trip with a little momentum. This is Believe in White Sox on the Believe Podcast Network. Thanks, everybody.